Today we're very
There we go,
happy.
John.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're really excited, as all of us are, to start off 2018 with a really fast start. Today with me will be my colleagues, Matt Drahzal. Matt, just say hello to everybody here.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Yes, Matt is, of course, the Worldwide Business Development Executive for Cognitive Systems. We also have J.D. Zeeman, the Worldwide Business Development Executive for Spectrum Scale and ESS. J.D.?
And good evening or good day to any of you listening on replay.
Yes, that's right. So kind of podcast style, we certainly hope that you'll find this information useful and valuable. The chart deck is a resource deck, so make sure that as you look at the chart deck later, you'll see there's a great deal of material in the back supplement that you'll find very useful. A lot of links, and let's go ahead and get started. So if you would please, let's go to the next chart, number 2. Take a look at our agenda. So we will overview for you today what's new with Spectrum Scale version 5 as well as with ESS. We'll talk about usage cases and deployments. I think you'll find that really exciting. Give you some detail on Spectrum Scale version 5 and the Elastic Storage Server. And of course, what's next? What's coming to help your business run faster, grow more rapidly and more efficiently? And we'll talk about next step and resources. We are being hosted today with our central contact after this webinar. If you have any questions, any follow-up, please use David Chen as the central point of contact so we can manage your questions and answer them all. And we have a esteemed panel of experts, Chris Maestas, Eric Spurley, and Lindsay Todd, all part of the worldwide and North America teams and available to all you. You may be seeing these in some of your engagements with IBM or as business partners. So thank you all for being here today. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started, and let's turn to the next chart. So you can see here, Spectrum Storage from IBM is the software-defined brand, and it covers a wide variety of management services, storage services, block, file, data protection, copy data management, hybrid cloud, and so forth. Today we're focusing on the Spectrum scale-out portion of it, the infrastructure software-defined. The IBM Spectrum Storage Suite license applies here, so everything that you're hearing today, if you are aware of the Spectrum Suite, where you can buy a license for a certain amount of terabytes and then apply it as you wish across these different products. Spectrum Scale and ESS is a full participant in the IBM Spectrum Storage Suite. So, well, Mr. Drahzal, so tell me, as you've been working with everything going on these days, what is it you're seeing in terms of this disruption and explosion?
Yeah, John, as you know, I do a lot of things for the company and work around the world. And one of the things that's constantly coming up is this data explosion problem and new ways of managing the large amounts of data. You know, if you just imagine what we have on the chart here, we can see that how much the data is growing and where is it all going. 90% of the world's data created in the last 2 years. But budgets are declining, and they're constantly declining. No matter where we go, people are trying to do more with less, trying to store more and store it with less. And in some cases, people don't even know where to put it. Sometimes they say the cloud, sometimes they say local. But we have solutions in IBM and a complete range of solutions to help all the customers. JD, talk to us about some evolutions.
Sure. So if we go on to the next slide, you can see that the market is definitely shifting. On the left, we have the traditional workloads where we've had the legacy systems, the transactional systems. That's largely block data, and that part of the business isn't really growing that much. It's the legacy. It's to some degree, critically important still, but the emerging, the growing area is really over on the right. That's the whole explosion of cognitive that the machine learning, artificial intelligence that you're hearing about, but also big data and all the additional analytics that's going on. Those emerging workloads use unstructured data as opposed to block data. And, Matt, when you had that prior chart that showed all the data that's been produced recently, over 80% of that new data is actually unstructured data. So it's the right-hand side here, largely file and object data. And so this requires massive scale, really rapid pace, and being able to deliver increased insights. We've heard a lot about data becoming the next natural resource, the most important natural resource, and being able to mine that data effectively is critically important. And the topic of this webinar, the Spectrum Scale product from a software standpoint and the pre-integrated solution of the elastic storage server fits squarely addressing this new cognitive and cloud workload space in the unstructured data area. All right, why don't we move on, and John, maybe you can provide a little more detail about Spectrum Scale, a quick positioning for everybody.
Absolutely. So everybody, the product that we're speaking about today was specifically designed for the unstructured file and unstructured object data growth, especially when we talk about an enterprise scenario where, as you can see in the diagram, what we're really wanting to do here is to create a scalable file system that has the capability to be software defined, to be able to use different types of storage, SSDs, fast disk, slow disk, and archiving to tape, and do all of that in a single global namespace as represented by the green bar, so that multiple workloads, regardless of their types of interface, can come in and access a common pool of data. One of the major things that happens as we look at this whole idea of cognitive in the future is the idea of being able to remove data movement between processes. If what we can do is create a ability to manage data with high performance and manage it in a single place, be able to replicate it, and be able to support file, object, Hadoop, Windows SIFs, NFS, Amazon S3, all of these types of interfaces in a common pool of storage, then it really starts to get at the ability to be able to see data come in, recognize it immediately, and then to be able to access it and act upon it instantaneously without having to file transfer it to another application, wait for the overnight update for the batch processes to propagate. And Spectrum Scale is exactly IBM's product designed to do that. We can do this locally in a single premise. We can do this across multiple sites and give the logical appearance of a single namespace. So with that as just an overview, Matt, what is it that people are sometimes asking about you in terms of different ways that this can be deployed, as the next chart talks about?
People love the freedom to choose, John, and they like to be able to deploy technologies like Spectrum Scale to meet their needs. So we give customers options. For example, Spectrum Scale has been on the market for a very long time as a software offering. A customer can acquire it through Passport Advantage, through a business partner, and create a configuration based upon Linux servers and storage that meets their needs. Also, customers saying, but we also want to use the cloud and deploy workloads to the cloud. Can you give me all the benefits of Spectrum Scale in the cloud? And you know what? You bet we can. Whether that's in AWS or the IBM cloud, we have the ability to provide Spectrum Scale in those configurations as well. And finally, our fastest growing part of this business is customers who are saying, we want one-stop shopping. We just want to get a solution which does it all. We want the servers, the storage, the software in order to make this work, even the services. So we're able to provide, as IBM, something called the Elastic Storage Server, which is that complete solution. Later on, you'll hear about our Coral implementation. It is the key component to driving the fastest computer in the entire world, or let's just say the largest machine learning system in the entire world. So 3 choices, lots of liberty and freedom there, and you can deploy them around the planet, and these choices will allow customers to collaborate no matter how the instances are deployed. John?
Okay.
JD?
Yep. No, I think I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the use cases that these different deployment models are used for. And this, tries to line them up kind of in groupings by, customer challenge, so resiliency down through modernizing and transforming the environment, and then looking at next generation workloads, which again is kind of a very important emerging area. Historically, one of the easiest ways for a customer to move into Spectrum Scale and start, an experience there is with the backup and restore. It is one of our largest use cases. We're seeing it deployed around the world, and effectively we have, with all of this increase in data, a requirement to back it up and then to quickly to be able to restore it. And as you grow and grow and grow the amount of unstructured data, the backup can become a challenge. But by pointing to Spectrum Scale and having Spectrum Scale and potentially the Elastic Storage server be the repository for the backup data, and that could be from Spectrum Protect, the IBM product, or it could be from Commvault, it could be from different alternatives in the marketplace. But if you point to Spectrum Scale and the Elastic Storage server as a potential option, you're going to have a much faster ability to back things up. You're going to have a much faster restore, and you're going to be able to have a common pool of backup. So no silos, no separate, let's say Spectrum Protect backup silos. You're going to have a common pool of data. So much faster, much more resilient, all the enterprise features, and with enhancements that have been built into Spectrum Protect and the other products, again, there isn't the need for VTL really anymore, and we got a tremendous cost advantage over alternatives like data domain. So you get performance, scalability, and then extensibility if you bring it in that way. Archival is another piece that is a critical portion of Spectrum Scale's capability. It does the lifecycle management. It can include the flash, the fast disk, slow disk, tape, object, cloud, you name it. And the least expensive way to store data is tape. When it's sitting there, it's not using any energy at all as a tape cartridge. There's potentially a little bit of a delay in bringing the data back, but depending on what it's being used for, and if it's archival, it's just a fantastic solution. So we see a number of customers bringing in Spectrum Scale because they want to manage that budget, that need to do more with less. Data sizes are increasing, and the only way that it works most effectively for them is to introduce a tape tier or an object tier in, and being able to have that archival is an important piece. The whole information lifecycle management, kind of fits into that view. Another really important part associated more with workload and this modernized and transform is the idea of a data ocean. Not only do you have huge volume of data and increasing velocity of data, but you have this increasing variety of data. And if you have to do a lot of extract, transform, and load, it gets slow, it gets expensive, you risk having the data start becoming inconsistent. If you could have a single common repository, not just even a data lake, but a data ocean, it's so big, and being able to have different applications access the data in different forms, put it in as a file, read it out as an object, unified file and object as an example, or being able to do your MapReduce work and pull the data out of this common repository via HDFS transparency. All of these things are possible now with a single data ocean with all of the different types of data that are supported by Spectrum Scale. So we're seeing a number of customers look at that. The legacy of Spectrum Scale and continuing to be the biggest use case for us is technical computing. and that might have a legacy feel for certain customers, kind of in the supercomputing realm, like the Argonne National Labs, Oak Ridge, Lawrence Livermore, Coral kind of work. But it's increasingly being seen in all different industries in all different areas. So autonomic driving in automotive, or the genomics, sequencing, and personalized medicine in life sciences. We're seeing more and more technical computing becoming critical across industries. And our speed and scalability of Spectrum Scale is unrivaled, and so we see a number of customers bringing in Spectrum Scale to support their technical use, their technical computing use cases. Big data is probably the emerging case. We'll have some more slides coming up on that, especially as it relates to Hortonworks and Hadoop. You can reduce your infrastructure associated with Hadoop by potentially up to 70%. You can avoid multiple copies, triple or quadruple replication. Again, improve workflow, all kinds of good benefits from the big data and analytics. And finally, there's a number of ISVs and industry solutions associated with this. ISVs like SAS and their Grid, SAP HANA, where we have major customers that have spoken out, like Bosch, talking about their SAP HANA experience and acceleration with Spectrum Scale. So we have a whole grouping of use cases that really can exploit and provide customer advantage from using Spectrum Scale. John, why don't you talk a little bit more about some of the industry examples?
Absolutely. So there's, of course, the old Chinese saying, the picture is worth 1,000 words. I happen to be Chinese American. What we've offered for you here today is when you download the handout, and make sure that you do refresh the handout. If you had downloaded it very early, you might have gotten an older version. This here, these links are all live. These customers were kind enough to express and place on YouTube discussions of what they're doing with their business using Spectrum Scale. Cypress Semiconductor is chip design, and as you might imagine, in today's world, the huge iterative models to be able to optimize cost of manufacture, speed of transistor, lower packaging in 3 dimensions is a very large scale, and at the speed that industry runs, missing a chip design cycle basically can be very injurious. And Cypress has moved to Spectrum Scale first on commodity storage and then later on to ESS, because the speed that they were getting absolutely allowed them to make sure they were staying ahead of the curve in terms of being able to get all of their chip designs done as fast as possible, leveraging the speed of Spectrum Scale. Have a look at those YouTubes and enjoy those. Viewpoint is a finance customer. Sometimes there's a saying that Spectrum Scale, maybe it's for the high performance, but what about finance? Viewpoint is a finance industry customer. What they basically do, all these magical check images that we see on our online banking account today, and you can click on the twisty and you see a copy of the check. Viewpoint is in this kind of a business as a company that's holding and managing and working with the finance industry to provide those kinds of services. And of course, there's a lot of interlocks with financial kinds of applications when you're in that kind of a space. Have a look at that one. Sidra, which is in Qatar, Qatar, if you're not familiar with the way that is pronounced, is one of the jewels of the Middle East. That is a country that is putting the entire population as well as all of the expatriates on a genomics, advanced medicine kinds of profiles. And you can see there how it's being used in the healthcare space across all the different kinds of healthcare, patient records, and so forth. Nuanced communications. When you talk to Siri or when you talk to Google Voice, those kinds of technologies is the industry that Nuance plays in, and so that when you're doing voice response, when you're talking to your car and asking it to do something, Nuance is probably somewhere in that mix, creating amazing pattern recognition kinds of capabilities to be able to respond properly to speech and imaging. The Red Bull Racing is a Formula One company. The point about them is that analytics in real time, literally at racing speed while the race is going on, real-time analytics is being crunched for the purposes of optimizing the race as it proceeds. But the philosophies and the tool sets are exactly the same things that are being used in every industry today, whether it's retail, whether it's government and law enforcement, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in utilities for managing the infrastructure or responses to situations. All of the infrastructure pieces, whether it's a job scheduler, Spectrum Scale, and ESS is to store the data, application workflow integration, all of those can be seen and play. Now, those of us who happen to be sports fans, you may have noticed that in the beautiful city of Atlanta, Georgia, there is a new stadium hosting the Atlanta Falcons and then the soccer team, the football for the rest of the world, which we all know is a much bigger deal. But they've been gracious enough to do a whole series of videos to illustrate how creating a new level of a fan experience, whether it's a Wi-Fi in your hotspot in full video HD while you're sitting there watching the game, being able to see things on the big screen, as well as important things, video surveillance, facial recognition to make sure that everyone is secure. All of those technologies are in play at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And you can see there how Spectrum Scale and ESS is used as the video repository and the feeds management for the rest of that infrastructure. Many of these things were talked about at the annual supercomputing conference. On the far left, supercomputing is an annual conference in November where these technologies, which once were just HPC, high-performance computing, now basically is a major confluence of high technology analytics for every industry in the world. So thank you very much to those customers for being willing to share with all of us. I invite you to look at these exciting use cases in real-time high definition. And now I think what we ought to do is let's go take a look at the technologies and give you the updates that you've been waiting for on what's new with this technology. Spectrum Scale version 5 is the topic here. And I think, why don't we turn to Mr. Matt Drahzal and just give us an overview of what the highlights are, the main messages for Spectrum Scale version 5. What do you think, Matt?
Sure. I'd love to do that. And you got to hold me back in case I get too technical, because I'd really love to talk about all the things that we've done to make this a really special release.
Great. Let's see chart 11.
Well, from the top level, we're doing things to make Spectrum Scale easier to manage, easier to deploy, and easier to run. And that means things like graphical user interface changes, so where we can do things like monitor the networking performance. A lot of customers ask for that, and that's a kind of important thing. We've done work to simplify deployment. For example, instead of having a lot of choices, we've eliminated choices and made it drop-dead simple so that, as we all like to joke, even Matt Drahzal can deploy a Spectrum Scale solution. For example, we have a default file system block size of 4 megabytes now. We've eliminated the 32 sub-block limit. All these things just to make it easier to deploy and manage currently existing and new installations. We're selling into marketplaces where that's critically important. We've also done a great deal of work as part of this Coral that we're talking about. JD will give you some performance in the future of it, and that means that we've made Spectrum Scale much, much faster than it has ever been before. We've done optimizations to handle our requirement to hit 2.5 terabytes a second of streaming performance. So you'll see on the same hardware, you may see incredibly much better performance on the same hardware. So it's a huge, important release. And the final thing I'd like to talk about is that you're going to hear more and more, especially from companies dealing in Europe, GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. You want to pay attention to that. It's coming up and being enforceable in May of this year, and it is intended to strengthen and unify data protections for individuals in the EU and addressing the export of data outside of the EU. We're adding capabilities and features we've added capabilities and features into Spectrum Scale to monitor data access, prevent data deletion, handle things like immutability, and enable customers to be more compliant with GDPR requirements. So pay attention to that as well as you start talking, because everything is global and international now. Boy, I could go on forever, but I do want to talk about all the other great things that we're doing. It's important. It has gone generally available, and it is available for customers who have their support under IBM. So if they're on subscription support from IBM, they will be able to deploy Spectrum Scale 5 moving forward. All right. JD, why don't you talk a little bit about
I think
Coral?
lots of customers will want to do that. And again, before I go into the Coral slide here, just to mention, I don't think it's lost on too many people, but it's version 5, not version 4.2.4, right? So this is our first new version in over 3.5 years, and that's because of the dramatic improvements in performance, the advances that we made in, the ease of use and the additional auditability and audit logging and all of these things. It's a dramatic enhancement, a major change, and from a performance standpoint, that was really driven by the Department of Energy requirements. They were, if I might categorize it this way, like our anchor development customers we were working with, because they had some very strenuous requirements that you can see listed here on this page. Coral is the collaboration of Oak Ridge, Argonne, and Lawrence Livermore, 3 United States national laboratories, and they really pushed the envelope of what is possible. Some of this information, is kind of interesting, and the pure scalability of it. There's like over 5,000 servers, over 250 petabytes of storage. These things are interesting, but I think the most important for the majority of customers is really just the speed. The last couple pieces talking about how quickly you can get work done in terms of file creates and file shares. And, as we're dealing with this increase of data, it's great to know that you've got lots and lots of headroom, as you look years in advance. But it's also critically important to know that you can get to this data to make really quick decisions. You need to take the data, you need to turn it into insight, and then you need to turn it into action. If you can't do that, you're not going to get the value out. In Spectrum Scale and the work we're doing with version 5 is to allow you to get the value out of the data. So again, Coral is a great example of that. Lots of information, a lot of excitement about it, but again, it's really proving the performance that we have, in the solution. Matt, I appreciate the high level, but John, why don't we go into a little bit more of the detail about kind of those bullets that Matt talked about previously?
Absolutely. So let's have a look here at chart number 13. So here we're going to start to give you some more technical details as well as to point you to more information. The net result of all of this is that commercial version 5 that you can download today, when your entire Spectrum Scale system or your clusters are moving up, they will start to transparently take advantage of these performance enhancements that we have cascaded down into the commercial product. Certain workloads, especially ones that maybe have a lot of small block IOPS or mixed workloads where you maybe in the past were seeing interference between large sequential and small block workloads in the same file system, you should see dramatic improvements in I/O performance in workloads. And as a general rule, all workloads will run better, because not only did we do some things, and I'll talk about the sub-blocking in a second as one example of that, but we also, the second bullet here, greatly streamlined the internode communication latency. Spectrum Scale is a distributed cluster. Every single one of the nodes is able to talk to each other, and often does talk to each other, to do parallelism, to provide the scale and the speed that Spectrum Scale offers. But that means that communication in between the nodes could potentially become a bottleneck, especially if you're trying to do very small files and a whole lot of them and a whole lot of IOPS. So with this enhancement and streamlining of that internode communication, a much reduced latency, what the result is a much higher IOPS capability, a much shorter latency, and that's essential, because in the future, SSD, all flash, and then NVMe drives, what are they used for? Typically exactly that kind of workload, to drive up the IOPS, to do workloads that never could have been imagined before, but now with this newer speed of storage response time, all of a sudden become possible. Spectrum Scale is going to be right there for you as that new types of storage comes online. Now, how did we actually, as a proof point, go about getting the improved performance and space efficiency for mixed workloads? So the point here is that if you want to have a global file system, you really want to just take your workloads of all types and then just dump it into the system and have the system figure out how to optimize running small block and large block workloads side by side. That is the purpose of a change in the Spectrum Scale at the version 5 level. What we've basically done is introduce not only a new larger default block size to boost the sequential default rate, but we simultaneously introduced something known as variable subblocks. And the bottom line of what that is that when Spectrum Scale takes these bigger blocks and moves the data back and forth, now we can subdivide that block into much larger numbers of segments and thereby optimize the space efficiency. It used to be that for a given block size in Spectrum Scale, there was a fixed amount of subblocks, 32 per block size, and that means you had a lot of small files. You might be having to make a choice between wasting more space than you want to in terms of being able to use a larger block size. Now what we'll do with this release is, depending on your block size, we have the ability to have orders of magnitude more subblocks in a big block size, thus allowing small block workloads to be able to coexist nicely, have good space efficiency, and get the performance benefit of moving data back and forth, but not at the penalty of wasting space. That's how, depending on your workload, IOPS per second can improve 3 to 5 times over previous releases just by taking the workload and moving it to a newer block size. Many of the functions of Spectrum Scale version 5 will come online just by moving to the code level without having to redefine the file system. There are a few functions, and the variable subblock is one of those few functions that will require, if you get to a point where you want to take full advantage of this particular performance characteristic, it will require redefining the file system at the version 5 level. But of course, we have migration capabilities, multi-cluster capabilities, ability to copy data back and forth so that we can make that as non-disruptive or as least disruptive as possible. So there's some more detail in the supplement, but let's just take a look at a couple of other more detail level charts. And then, Matt, people tell me a little bit on the next chart. They talk a little bit about, as you were alluding to, different things that we were doing with the simpler administration. Is it really true that now what we do is we have the code do cognitive kinds of logic to try to self-tune parameters for you?
You'll notice that I get all of the ability to converse about simplifying. I think I am the proxy for somebody who needs to be simplified. Yeah. As alluded to earlier, we've eliminated 20 options that we use AI. We'll coin that. We'll use AI to monitor what's happening and change that on the fly. So I apologize just for a second here. So that means that I don't have to know what a lot of these particular things mean. And the graphical user interface, as alluded to, allows me to not know what an MM command is for a particular thing. You know, if I want to set up monitoring threshold for the systems, or I want to set up call home for Spectrum Scale. Spectrum Scale's got a call home ability to allow information to get sent to IBM so we can monitor things and work with you if there's any questions about what's happening. So diagnostic data can get sent back, and we can upload for PMRs information for questions that people have. So we have capacity monitoring in the graphical user interface, all the things that make our lives easy, deploy it quickly, and then make our lives easier when we're running the system. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for deploying to customers who are not Spectrum Scale aware already, and we do have those. John? JD, I'm sorry.
Yeah. CG, why don't you, I know when we've talked about some of the other things that the GUI is something that's special.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, JD.
I'll continue to cover with the GUI, but I forgot that there's a whole list of things on the next slide that are currently in the GUI that weren't in before, and I'm get so psyched about ease of use. I forgot that there was actually a listing of it. So I was doing it from memory.
You did a pretty good job with it too, man. I was impressed.
I wonder if there's anything I forgot.
Oh, there were a couple
let's look at the list. Let's see what's on there. There's a lot.
The AFM, I think, is really important, right, to be able to connect multiple sites together asynchronously. You know, asynchronous DR is one thing a lot of folks are very, interested in being able to do, and being able to do that through the GUI now is absolutely fantastic. The whole transparent cloud sharing, the ability to connect out to a cloud like an Amazon S3 or, the IBM Cloud Object Storage is another option with the TCT support. All of these things being able to handle with the GUI, I think, are real enhancements. Basically, it fills in a lot of the things, right? You mentioned the software call home, and it allows you now to really much more fully just move to the GUI if you want to, and a number of organizations have that interest. So the fact that we've added all these capabilities, there's not much you can't do with the GUI now, which is great news.
So I was traveling last week in the Nordics, and one of the customers just loved the fact that they could have a Spectrum Scale installation and include the cloud as part of their solution. And transparent cloud tiering makes that happen. So thanks for reminding me.
Agreed.
All right.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Go ahead. And then, of course, I think, Matt, I hear that there's a lot of interest in this file audit logging capability. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that on the next chart?
I included the GDPR, the concept that this is coming up, and that was also a big series of conversations when I was in Europe, and how we can see everything and track everything that happens, so that we can not only prevent access to data, but if data is accessed, we can document it, audit it, and see what happened when with all of the information that is personal in a customer location. This is about people. This is about people's privacy. And we have requirements from the financial industry about immutability and ensuring that things which should not be removed cannot be removed. And we also support that. So there will be a KPMG certification. John, is that complete yet? Do you remember?
Yes, actually, and on chart 16, we talk about this, please, David. The KPMG certification is being enacted as we speak. One of our IBM Germany colleagues is the lead on that, and that's in process right now. Important for compliance, important for the security and compliance of storing all of this data together.
So we got about 20 minutes left, John and JD, so we should probably remember that.
Yes, let's go ahead. So let's move ahead. I'd like to spend just a few minutes on the next chart, please, for Hadoop. Now, the thing that we'd like to offer here is that the perspective of IBM and Spectrum Scale is certainly Hadoop, a magnificent technology, somewhat starting to mature, but the thing that we'd like to really discuss here is that Hadoop is not the only data crunching part in the organization. It is actually part of an enterprise workflow. You think about that for a little bit. What that really means is a lot of the issues around maximizing efficiency of Hadoop is moving the data from the ingest systems into the Hadoop environment and then moving it out again. You think about that a little bit further. What that also means is that that's actually work to manage the data flows. It starts to complicate the data lifecycle because every time you start to make a copy of data and move it around to maybe a couple of different Hadoop clusters or different places, and all of a sudden, are we governing those multiple copies? Are we backing up the multiple copies? Do the multiple copies of data start to diverge in terms of their content and meaning? And that is exactly the issue. It's not, when we say extra copies of data you can save on those costs, it's not just the physical storage of a few more copies of data. It's the much bigger business issue, and you've all seen this before. How come this application is updated, but that one's not updated yet? Why? Multiple copies of data, multiple batch processes. This is what we're trying to address with our Hadoop support. So given that, go ahead to chart number 18, David. What we have here is that certainly some Hadoop clusters should always continue to be storage-rich servers, but some other clusters should definitely be part of the enterprise workflow. And those that are part of the enterprise workflow is exactly why we offer Hadoop integration on Spectrum Scale. Place your Hadoop clusters storage and data on Spectrum Scale, so the exact same centralized data, lake data ocean that's ingesting the data or holding the output of Hadoop can also be the place that Hadoop is directly operating on. Instead of loading a Hadoop cluster, how about we start the Hadoop job as soon as the data is loaded and received in off of the Internet of Things devices? That's what we're trying to bring to here. And of course, that's a step-by-step process, and like any workflow, that's a journey. But we are doing this so that we can not only maximize the aggregate throughput of a cluster by being able to run many more jobs at the same time, being able to eliminate data lags of loading, which is obviously causing the Hadoop cluster to idle while the data is being loaded or the results offloaded, and also to be able to do things like be able to independently scale, have very CPU-intensive Hadoop jobs be able to run at the same time that a very storage-intensive job be able to run. When you have a big Spectrum Scale, dynamically variable storage allocation system like that, then all of a sudden we can do those kinds of things with a scheduler. So this is really what the Hadoop support by IBM is about on Spectrum Scale. And so hopefully that is a value proposition from an enterprise workflow standpoint that we are clearly seeing a large amount of adoption and what is always going to be a couple-year journey for an enterprise to start to modify workflows to exploit these. But we are absolutely seeing this upflow. As a matter of fact, why don't we talk a little bit? JD was just at one of our major partners, Hortonworks, and talking about what Hortonworks is doing together with IBM to maximize exactly these kinds of environments. Let's go ahead, tell us a little bit, JD, what you saw when you were in Phoenix.
Yeah, I was at the kickoff meeting that they had for all of their own organization as well as all their partners, and IBM featured very, very prominently. They're working really closely with IBM to enhance the product, the whole piece that John's been talking about with the ability to have HDFS transparency and point to Spectrum Scale and potentially the elastic storage server to avoid the triple replication, get the improved workflow is definitely an important aspect of that. In fact, that along with the speed up that the power processor family offers, and as well as some collaboration with our analytics, IBM Analytics like DSX, earned IBM the designation of the Global Partner of the Year by Hortonworks. So you can see a little picture where they awarded a trophy and brought us all up on stage. So it was definitely a critical part. Hortonworks is growing, and they're one of the key players in the MapReduce space and continue to expand their presence. And IBM is closely integrated. Our certification that we achieved last year, and we will continue to update, is very valuable for customers to know that there is support there and know that they work very, very well together. So again, if you've got a Hortonworks environment or are considering one, then the potential synergy between their product and Spectrum Scale is something you should definitely consider, John. So, I think you've got some other resources that people could link to as well, beyond the ones with more information that are even listed here.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is part of the reference document, chart number 20. We'll just show that to you, but please download the deck. All those links can help you really see what so many enterprise organizations are starting to do, the reference architectures that we've built, all in pursuit of this enterprise workflow. So that's pretty exciting. And as you can tell, Spectrum Scale does a lot of things. It has many, many enhancements all running in parallel. And so our Q&A team is working as fast as they can to answer the questions. Please keep keying them in. We will answer all of those questions as we go along. For time's sake, we do want to make sure we get you to the updates as to what's coming next. So we'll let the Q&A team keep working that. And we'll leave the web conference up for as long as we can, but you will get a log of all the questions as well as answers to all your questions. So key away with your questions. Matt, now, of course, we've talked about Hortonworks. We talked about some things, but over in the, the healthcare space and the genomics, there's a lot going on over there at the same time, isn't there?
And in the interest of making things which could be complicated a lot simpler, I'm happy that not only do we have a lot of opportunities in healthcare and life sciences, but we now have a set of red books and red papers that help both customers, IBMers, and business partners understand how our technology applies to these workloads. And these are workload-specific capabilities. Dr. Lee's has been famous around the world, but the one that was just recently released was the Spectrum Scale Best Practices for Genomic Medicine Workloads. And I encourage everybody to download and read that. It's nice to see television commercials now about genomics companies and be able to say things like, hey, that's a customer of Spectrum Scale, and know that our technology is helping make the planet a lot healthier. So please download those and read them. Please. Okay, John, more news.
Right.
John.
So as you can tell in chart 22, as you can tell, Spectrum Scale, we've given you a flavor. Like any good restaurant or any good sporting event, hopefully we've given you a taste, and you can see that there's a lot more available on the menu. So there's other enhancements that if you're interested, please contact us. We'll be happy to engage with you. Our business partners are ready and happy to talk with you about all the capabilities that we may have in remote file management and transparent cloud sharing and the RESTful API. And don't forget, you can go right to that link shown on the screen, and you can start up in trial mode right now and try out Spectrum Scale for yourself using your Amazon Web Services account. And there's information in the supplement about all of that as well. All things that you can be contacting Mr. David Chen at the end if you want him to help coordinate. In the few minutes we have left, let's go forward, and we want to give you a quick update on the Elastic Storage Server as well as what's coming next for some of these products. So, JD, if you're still there, I understand that while the Elastic Storage Server has had a lot of customers saying that they've really seen a lot of value in it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're growing Spectrum Scale, but we're growing the Elastic Storage Server even more. People, are finding the value of it. I personally think it's the best instantiation of Spectrum Scale, both because of the fact that it's a pre-integrated building block. You've got IBM lab-based services support that comes with it to help get it set up, including looking at the network. You've got a single point of contact. You dial 1-800 number that can support the disk, the processing, the software, the network, you name it. But you basically can think of it as a set of building blocks, and we continue to enhance this building block. And one of the really notable things that we came out with toward the end of last year was, it's been in the field long enough, and we had enough customer experience that we were able to officially declare that it achieves 5 nines of availability. So this is really an enterprise class box that can address your unstructured data needs. So again, prepackaged, it takes the various elements and pulls them together. And Matt, you being the father of ESS, let me turn it over to you to share a little bit more about the components and some of the recent enhancements, and then maybe John can share our current family.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, JD. I'm really excited about it. One of the things that genomics customers love is this building block approach to grow. And every time you need to grow, there's no forklifts involved. You just add a building block, add an Elastic Storage Server. And when you do, Spectrum Scale redistributes the work, redistributes the data across the new building blocks, and you get an improvement in capacity, bandwidth, performance, and the single namespace grows across all of the ESS systems. And we're able to do that using, for one of our instantiations, inexpensive spinning disks. 10 gig, 7200 RPM nearline SAS drives. That is how we did the 250 petabytes at Oak Ridge National Lab. It's being installed with spinning disks. But these spinning disks break, of course. They're mechanical devices. And we've implemented erasure coding across all the disks and all the enclosures so that when a rebuild occurs for a failed disk, we can literally rebuild critical disk data in minutes instead of days. Remember, a spinning disk can do about 100 megabytes a second. Imagine what you need for 2.5 petabytes, 2.5 terabytes a second of performance. And with some of our configurations, you can remove entire enclosures and the system still stays up and running. Now, we mentioned genomics earlier. One of the things that's important is a bit really matters in a medical diagnosis. End-to-end checksums of being able to get data all the way from the disk itself to the client, ensuring that it is still correct and it's been not changed en route, is very, very important for any false positives or false data. And that 5 nines of reliability is done with software-defined storage. That's kind of nice. There's not a disk controller in the Elastic Storage Server. It is all software-defined system using Spectrum Scale and Spectrum Scale RAID to manage 5 petabytes of disk in a single 42U rack. And John will show you a little bit smaller configurations, and those scale to the multiple petascales. John, why don't you talk a little bit more about the specific offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. Here on chart number 26, you can see the current family. We're in the second generation. We refreshed the entire product line in calendar year 2017. On the left-hand side, chart 26 will show you there we are, the all-flash devices for speed. And you can see there the IBM conservatively rated throughput that you can reasonably expect out of these systems. All flash devices come in 3 different models, And then the capacity devices, which are the HDD devices. The largest one, the GL6 with 502 disk drives, all enclosed in a single rack. Those are numbers that we give you that will operate not only when the system is just freshly loaded, but when it is running after long periods of time, after a large amount of workloads and fragmentation and a variety of things are all running at the same time. Spectrum Scale, through its distribution, Spectrum Scale rate is delivering those numbers consistently from beginning to end. And the latest that we have is a new entry model, a GL1S, so that an initial entry can be done, and pretty soon we're going to start talking about the future so that you'll be able to see how we could upgrade those to larger models over time. But that is the product line as we see it today, Elastic Storage Server. As a matter of fact, JD, last time we talked, you mentioned that there's some news that just came out over the last couple of days about those particular products from Storage Magazine. What did you see?
Absolutely. So Storage Magazine is the world's largest, as far as I know, kind of storage-centric website magazine, and they named 4 IBM storage solutions as finalists for their 2017 Products of the Year. And 2 of those 4, and IBM got more than any other major provider, 2 of IBM's 4 were actually Spectrum Scale and the Elastic Storage Server. So we are seeing, third-party validation and recognition of the tremendous success that we're having, the contribution we're making, the value that we're driving for our customers. So you can see I tweeted about both those actually literally yesterday. So please feel free to follow those or reach out. Look at John. I know you and Matt. You also tweet. So we'll keep communicating this. But this is a recognized great product, and again, we're seeing the industry acknowledge that. So I thought this was an important validation of that.
Okay. All right. Hey, that's pretty exciting. So, folks, I think now is we're about at the time that you've all been waiting for, what's coming soon. And so, yes, we will run a little bit past the top of the hour, and I know we recognize your time is valuable, but stick with us because now I think, Matt, we want to just do an overview of some of the things that will be coming for Spectrum Scale. And you want to start off, and then maybe we'll add a couple comments. But what do you see as important to what's coming?
John, I think that we're going to continue to see more performance improvements because I've seen what the development team has planned and what they're doing. You're going to see that growing. And we mentioned in this slide deck here, further improvements in the genomics blueprints, applicability to specific customers. I love the fact that customers are going to be able to go to AWS and run Spectrum Scale for their production workloads when they're running in AWS, and obviously in the IBM cloud as well for those particular customers. And you'll see as Hortonworks evolves, you will see Spectrum Scale match the Hortonworks releases so that those customers continue to move forward. And everybody asks about Docker and what are people doing about things like Docker, and you'll see more of that in the future. And don't forget that technology is also changing as far as what disks are. We're accustomed to SAS drives now, nearline SAS drives, flash drives, but NVMe is going to be a significant part of the future of customers' technology. So you'll see more and more support for NVMe. For those interested, we're including NVMe devices in Coral. In every one of the servers in our Coral installation, we're including an NVMe device. It's that important.
Yeah, that's exciting. There's a lot to come. And JD, would you like to add a couple of your perspective when you look at some of the things coming?
Well, I just maybe reinforce what Matt said about the cloud. I think that, customers are increasingly looking at multi-cloud as a critical underpinning of what they're doing. Whether it's private cloud, some things out to the public cloud, the ability to connect between the two is absolutely critical. And so being able to offer more variety and more options is something that we're definitely focused on, whether it be a managed service that you could get through IBM or, again, making Spectrum Scale available through the Quick Start on Amazon. You know, all of this connectivity, the transparent cloud tiering, I think we're going to see more and more of that occurring. And the fact that Spectrum Scale has been designed and now being enhanced to facilitate that would definitely be what I would highlight right here.
Yeah.
I
can't add a...
Sometimes I can add one thing. Sometimes in the future, we may not know where our data is, but Spectrum Scale will, and we'll be able to get it for us.
I cannot add a single thing to that. That's wonderful. So with that, why don't I just, let's go to the next chart, and let's just give all of you here the Elastic Storage Server, of course, will soon be releasing another software release which will integrate the Spectrum Scale version 5 software within itself, so that all of these version 5 performance enhancements will be integrated in the solution, and that will be coming very, very soon. Also, many of you out there have asked to say, this is great technology. Is there something coming down the line where I could have more help in being able to manage this technology, to be able to have more help, especially from a remote basis, to assist my system administrators, to help me be able to do workflow and application integration, monitoring, tuning? Absolutely, yes. We're bringing that into the portfolio. We're absolutely accepting pilot customer nominations for that offering. So if any of those topics sounds of interest to you at all, please use the contact with David Chen, and we'll be love to discuss with you about a possible pilot customer nomination to examine this new offering that will be coming very, very soon. On the longer term, we absolutely understand, and we'll be working on protocol nodes, more complete support within the Elastic Storage Server's management structure and ordering structure for all of us. We absolutely hear all of you request, could I maybe, in addition to the entry model, could I possibly have a model that has a drawer flash and some other things with the HDD? So we have all those, and absolutely. Higher density, higher interconnect speeds, newer processors, bigger gigabytes and density for footprint is all in this, and we are far from finished with what we'll be doing with Spectrum Scale RAID as a software-defined storage in the future. Anything you want to add to that, Matt or JD?
And some of these are actually in beta tested customers today, so that's why we can talk about them a little bit, because we know they work.
Yes. Well, folks, you've been kind. Let's wrap up here. And let's just go to the next chart. Please, this is a resource deck for you. Please take advantage and use the deck as a foundation for questions or things that you might want to engage with us to find out more information. In the supplement, there's a lot of information, and we do want to highlight in this information a couple of things, in particular the Spectrum Scale user group. So David, if you'd go with me to the next chart. And this is there are some things in life for which the price is always exactly right, and the Spectrum Scale user group is one of those. There's not a cost. You just have to, of course, just transport yourself there, but these are rich, powerful gatherings of Spectrum Scale and ESS users. You can see in the lower right-hand column ones that are coming up across the world. Take advantage of going to the website, and for sure, go to the presentations list and get a feel for the rich diversity and robustness of information that has been posted out there for all of us as part of the ecosystem. And sign up for IBM Technical Universities this year, where a lot of these topics will have much more detail, and there will be a Spectrum Scale user group at most of our major systems technical universities in 2018. Something really, really exciting. Go ahead.
And we publish information from the development team, which gives you a lot of details and specifically about what we're doing. So please use that as a resource. You'll get better information there than even from me.
Well said. Let's let's wrap up and give you all a chance, those of you who are sticking with us and being a couple minutes late to your 1 o'clock meeting. Please take advantage of this. Like any good thing in life, do something today. If you see there's something useful, just take the 2-minute rule. Just get that email sent off. Go and just hit that link to just get a start on trying out Scale on Amazon Web Services or look at the virtual machine. But take an action. And the contact for IBM as a result of this webinar, David Chen has kindly enough signed up to say he will take the central point of contact for all your follow-up questions, and he'll of course disperse it out to the IBM and business partner community team appropriately. But that way we can track it, make sure that everything that you are interested in, we respond nicely and timely to you and help you with your business and your business goals. So thank you, David, for letting us fill up your in-basket. And with that, actually, David, if you're on the line, I think you have just a final thing to say. If you like today's webinar, what else will the Washington Systems Center in North America be putting on for everybody?
Thank you, John. This is David Chen. Thank you for this wonderful webinar. I really enjoyed it. And to the last page, I'm showing the upcoming events. As you can see, this webinar has been ongoing for multiple years, and it covers specifically for IBM storage. Every month we have about 2 webinars on average. And at the bottom of this page, you can see 3 webinars coming up. One on February 16 and one on February 22 and March 1st. Please mark this one. We're going to have another Spectrum Scale ESS webinar specifically focusing on the application case studies. So please look into this one. Please go to our website to sign in. Meanwhile, if you have any further questions or comments or feedback, definitely shoot me an email. I will assemble it together and to pass it out to everyone. So we're definitely looking to further improve our communication. And the bottom line is we want you all to have a good time enjoying Spectrum Scale and ESS. So thank you very much. We will keep the Q&A panel on for a little while. So if you still have an unanswered question and you would like to discuss today, please feel free to the panel and continue enter your question there. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everybody. On behalf of the speaker team, thank you so much. We'll leave it up for just a little bit longer, but we'll get a transcript of all of the questions. Because when the webinar ends, then the Q&A panel does go away. So that's right now. If you want to key in that question that you've been waiting to get around to, you got just a couple more minutes to key it in. And even if we can't answer it right now for you, we'll get back to you. Matt and JD, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
And thank you to our Q&A panel. Those of you who have been watching it, they've been working hard in the graphic. Eric Spurley, thank you. Chris Maestas, thank you. Lindsay Todd, thank you very much for your hard work in the background. Some of the unsung heroes, but those of you on the Q&A panel, you know how hard they've been working to keep up with your requests for information.
Yeah,
okay, David, maybe you want to...
I will post the Q&A question through the registration website so you can easily find them. Together, you can also see the PowerPoint presentation has also been uploaded there. So just in case you need to get
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you all, everyone. Enjoy the afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, team. So thank you for joining today's call. To leave, you can press the X in the upper right-hand corner of your control panel. Other than that, the session is now finished. Thank you, and have a great day.
Okay.